Long before Dustfall Valley earned its name, before settlers built crooked wooden storefronts and dusty saloons, the desert already belonged to the Apache. They moved with the seasons, following water, game, and the quiet wisdom passed down through generations. Among them was a young boy named Taza, born beneath a crimson sunset that elders said was a sign of a strong spirit. Taza grew up learning the old ways. His father taught him to track deer by broken twigs and faint hoof prints. His mother showed him how to respect every animal he hunted, thanking it for feeding the tribe. At night, the elders told stories by firelight tales of brave ancestors, sacred mountains, and the importance of unity. These lessons shaped Taza's childhood. He laughed easily then, ran barefoot through mesquite trees, and dreamed of becoming a protector of his people. But the frontier was changing. When Taza was 16, a treaty promised peace between his tribe and nearby settlers. Soldiers shook hands with Apache leaders, promising safety and shared land. Trust was fragile but hopeful. For the first time, Taza believed the stories about peace might come true. Then, one terrible dawn, everything shattered. A group of armed men attacked the Apache camp while most warriors were away hunting. Taza woke to screams and smoke. He ran outside to find chaos horses panicking, gunshots echoing, and fires devouring Tippis. He searched desperately for his family. He found his mother lying near the riverbank. His father never returned. The attackers vanished, leaving broken lives behind. Later, Taza learned they were settlers seeking revenge for stolen cattle his people had never touched. The treaty meant nothing now. Trust died that morning. From that day forward, something inside Taza hardened. Grief became his teacher. Rage became his shield. He trained harder than any warrior his age. He learned to fight not just with arrows and spears, but with strategy. Elders saw his skill but worried about his silence. He stopped laughing, stopped telling stories, stopped dreaming. In Apache culture, warriors fought not for glory but for protection. Honor mattered. Family mattered. But Taza believed love only led to loss. He watched friends marry, start families, build joy, and he stayed apart. The desert wind became his only companion. Over time, his reputation grew. Traders passing through Dustfall whispered his name with fear. Black Hawk, they called him. A ghost of the mountains, a man with no mercy. But none of them truly knew him. Taza wasn't cruel, he was broken. He helped elders carry water. He protected children during storms. But he never let anyone close. When women showed interest, he turned away. When friends invited him to celebrations, he disappeared into the hills. He told himself, love is weakness. Weakness gets people killed. Years passed. The frontier became wilder. Bandits roamed freely. Soldiers built forts. Laws changed with every new sheriff. And still, Taza walked alone. At night, he dreamed of his mother's voice calling his name. He woke sweating, fists clenched, heart racing. The past never left him. Educational insight. Among Apache tribes, emotional strength and self-control were highly respected. Warriors were trained to endure hardship quietly, which sometimes meant carrying pain alone. Storytelling, ceremonies, and community were meant to heal wounds, but trauma could still leave lasting scars. One evening, Taza sat on a cliff overlooking Dustfall Valley. Below, lanterns flickered in saloons. Laughter drifted upward. Settlers celebrated, drank, lived freely. He felt like an outsider in both worlds, now too Apache for the townsfolk, too distant for his own people. "I belong nowhere," he whispered to the wind. That night, he made a promise to himself. He would protect others, but never love again. He would fight battles, but never open his heart. He would survive, but never hope. Little did he know, fate was already riding toward Dustfall Valley. A woman would arrive who would challenge everything he believed. And the warrior who swore never to love would soon face the greatest battle of his life, not with guns or arrows, but with his own guarded heart. The wagon creaked as it rolled across the rocky trail leading into Dustfall Valley. Sunlight shimmered on the horizon, painting the desert gold. Sitting atop a stack of books and wrapped in a faded blue shawl was Clara Whitmore, a schoolteacher from Missouri who believed the future could be shaped with ink and paper. Back east, people called her foolish. Why go west? They asked. It's dangerous, lawless, full of outlaws and savages. But Clara believed education could change hearts. She had answered a newspaper advertisement seeking teachers for frontier towns. Dustfall needed a school. Children needed hope. And Clara needed purpose. Her father had been a Civil War veteran who taught her that courage meant standing where others wouldn't. When he died, she promised herself she would live boldly. So here she was traveling alone into the Wild West. Educational insight. During westward expansion, many women traveled alone to become teachers, nurses, and homesteaders. Schools were often the first step toward building stable frontier communities. Clara had been on the road for weeks. Her clothes were dusty, her hands blistered from holding reins, but her spirit remained strong. She practiced lesson plans aloud as her mule plodded forward. A is for apple. B is for brave. She laughed softly. Suddenly, the mule froze. From behind the rocks, 4 armed men appeared. Their hats were low, rifles ready. Their smiles were cruel. "Well now," one sneered, "what do we have here?" A lone lady far from home. Clara's heart slammed against her ribs. She knew these men weren't just travelers. They wore no badges. Their horses were branded with stolen marks, rustlers. "Please," she said, steadying her voice. "I'm just a teacher." "Then you won't mind donating them pretty books," another laughed. They grabbed her wagon, tearing open crates. Pages flew into the dirt. Clara rushed forward, trying to save them. "Stop! Those are for children." A man shoved her to the ground. Fear swallowed her. She squeezed her eyes shut, waiting for the worst. Then came a sound like thunder. A horse burst from the ridge. Dust exploded. Before the men could react, a dark figure charged through them, swift, silent, deadly. It was Tiazia. His bow sang. An arrow struck the ground inches from a rustler's boot. Another knocked a rifle from a man's hands. The leader tried to run, but Taza blocked his path like a shadow. "You leave," he warned in broken English, "or you die." The men didn't wait to argue. They fled, scrambling for their horses and disappearing into the hills. Silence fell. Clara sat frozen in the dirt. Then she realized she was alive. She looked up at her rescuer. He was not what she expected. He wasn't savage or wild-eyed. His face was calm, almost sad. He dismounted slowly and extended a hand to help her stand. "Are you hurt?" he asked softly. She stared, surprised by his gentle voice. No, I'm fine," she said. He picked up her scattered books and dusted them carefully, as if they were fragile treasures. You value these, he said. They're my life, she answered. For a moment. They simply stood there, strangers connected by fate. My name is Clara, she said, offering her hand. He hesitated, then shook it. Taza. Educational insight. Many Apache people traded peacefully with settlers and spoke English or Spanish. Popular media often ignores this truth. They walked together into Dustfall Valley. Townsfolk stared at an Apache warrior escorting a white woman. Whispers followed them. Is she a prisoner? Is he dangerous? Clara ignored them. At the edge of town, Taza stopped. You safe here, he said. Thank you, she smiled. You saved my life. He nodded once and turned to leave, but something strange happened. She didn't feel afraid of him. She felt curious. Over the next few days, Clara opened the tiny schoolhouse. It was nothing more than a wooden shack with a crooked roof. Children trickled in dirty, barefoot, eager. Then one morning, she saw Taza standing outside. He didn't enter. He just watched. The next day, he returned, this time with a young Apache boy. Teach him, Taza said. He wants to read. Clara's heart swelled. Of course. From that day on, Taza came often. He stood quietly while the boy learned letters. Sometimes he stayed longer. Sometimes he asked questions. What is this word? Why children learn this? She taught him patiently. And slowly, the warrior who closed his heart began to open his mind. Little did he know, this brave teacher from Missouri was about to change his destiny forever. The desert sun had barely risen over Dustfall Valley when Taza arrived at the little schoolhouse again. Clara was already outside, sweeping dust from the porch, her bonnet tied firmly under her chin. The children were gathering in uneven lines, chattering excitedly, their bare feet stirring up small clouds of sand. Taza watched quietly from a distance, leaning against a mesquite tree. The townsfolk had long whispered about the Black Hawk Apache, a warrior who never smiled, who had never loved. Yet here he was, standing silently while the children recited their letters. The townsfolk didn't understand it, but Taza did not yet fully, but he understood that something about Clara made him feel lighter. Every day he returned. Sometimes he came with the boy he had brought before. Other times he simply lingered nearby, observing. Clara noticed him but never asked too much. She didn't push. Instead, she continued her lessons with patience, knowing that trust in these lands could take longer than a season to grow. One morning, as a young girl stumbled over her spelling, Taza instinctively stepped forward. He bent down and corrected her posture gently, guiding her hands to the book. Clara looked up and caught his eyes. For the first time, she saw something entirely unexpected: vulnerability. There was a softness there that no one in the valley had ever seen before. Taza's lips twitched, almost like a smile, but he caught himself. The walls he had built around his heart were high and thick, forged in grief and loss. A lifetime of pain had taught him that attachment brought suffering. Yet the presence of this woman, a stranger who spoke in soft tones, who cared for knowledge as fiercely as life itself, was slowly, imperceptibly, chipping away at those defenses. Educational insight. The Apache valued observation, patience, and subtle teaching. Elders often used indirect methods to impart wisdom. Taza's cautious approach to Clara mirrors this cultural practice. He doesn't rush. He watches, and he learns through example rather than direct instruction. Days turned into weeks. Taza found himself sitting by the edge of the schoolyard, his bow leaning against the wall, watching the children laugh, memorize poems, and share stories. He noticed how Clara encouraged them, how she listened with care, and how her eyes sparkled when she corrected a mistake with kindness rather than reprimand. One afternoon, as the sun burned low in the western sky, a dust cloud appeared on the horizon, a group of traveling traders approaching the valley. Taza instinctively reached for his bow, scanning for danger. But the traders passed without incident, waving to Clara and the children. The tension in Taza's shoulders eased, and for a brief moment he felt safe. That evening, Clara approached him. "You stayed again today," she said, her voice gentle, curious. Taza shifted, uncomfortable with the directness. "I watch," he admitted, his English halting but sincere. Clara smiled. "You watch, but you don't join. You teach in your own way, without speaking." He looked at her, the first flicker of admiration crossing his stoic face. "Children learn," he replied simply. Her smile widened. "Yes, and you're helping. More than you realize." It was the first time Taza allowed someone to acknowledge his efforts without suspicion. Her words weren't judgmental. They weren't demanding. They were recognition, a simple, human connection that had eluded him for years. Over the next several weeks, Clara and Taza developed a silent rhythm. He would appear in the morning and leave at sunset. Sometimes he would bring small gift stones shaped like hearts, feathers, or rare desert flowers. At first, Clara was startled. She had never received anything like this from a warrior known for fearsome skill in battle. But she accepted them with grace, understanding that this was Taza's way of communicating, of reaching across the barrier he had built around himself. Educational insight. Among the Apache, gifts and symbolic gestures were often used to communicate emotions, respect, or intentions. Direct verbal expression of love was rare, especially for men who had experienced trauma. Actions often spoke louder than words. One evening, after the schoolhouse was empty, Taza stayed longer than usual. Clara was closing the shutters when she heard the soft sound of his voice, almost a whisper. "I like you," he said, the words foreign on his tongue, hesitant but true. Clara's heart skipped. She didn't step back. Instead, she replied softly, "I like you too, Taza." The moment passed quickly, yet it changed everything. For the first time, Taza realized that love didn't have to be weakness. It could be a quiet strength, a force that gave him purpose beyond survival and revenge. By the time the sun dipped behind the horizon, casting long shadows over the valley, Taza felt a strange warmth. He didn't understand it fully, but he knew one thing: his walls, so carefully built from years of grief and loss, were beginning to crack. And Clara Whitmore, teacher, pioneer, and fearless heart, was the reason that the quiet rhythm of Dustfall Valley was shattered one scorching afternoon. The sun blazed overhead, and the wind stirred the dust into tiny whirlwinds across the streets. Children laughed in the schoolyard, oblivious to the danger that crept closer with each horse's hoofbeat. Oblivious to the danger that crept closer with each horse, to the danger that crept closer with each horse's hoofbeat. Black cloud of dust signaled trouble. The sheriff's posse, or at least men claiming to uphold the law, arrived, shouting accusations. "Black Hawk Apache! They cried, "Cattle thief! Criminal!" Taza froze. His instincts sharpened like a drawn arrow. He had spent years avoiding unjust fights, navigating a frontier filled with prejudice. But this was personal. He had not stolen cattle. The rustlers had framed him. Taking advantage of his reputation as a warrior, the settlers feared. Clara, standing in the schoolhouse doorway, felt her stomach twist. She had grown to trust Taza, and her heart knew the truth. He was innocent. She ran forward, raising her arms, trying to block the mob. "Stop!" she shouted. "He saved my life. He protects this valley. He's not guilty." But words were not enough. The mob advanced, pistols drawn. One man spat into the dust at Taza's feet. Taza knew that reasoning with them would do no good. Violence was imminent. He turned to Clara. "Hide," he said. "I will handle this." Educational insight. False accusations against Native Americans were tragically common during westward expansion. Prejudice often led to lynchings, unjust imprisonment, or violence, even for those who had contributed positively to their communities. Clara obeyed, ducking behind the schoolhouse, heart pounding. Taza stepped into the open street. His presence alone caused the mob to hesitate. He was a shadow of power, calm and lethal, standing tall despite the rising tension. One man fired. Taza moved with lightning speed, dodging the shot and disarming the attacker with a precise strike. Horses bolted. Dust clouds rose. Taza was a whirlwind of motion, each movement disciplined, each gesture calculated. The mob realized they were facing a warrior unlike any they had encountered. But Taza did not kill. He incapacitated. He fought to protect, not to punish. Clara watched in awe and fear. She could see the strain on him. The fight wasn't just physical. It was the battle to remain controlled, to protect without giving in to rage. Her heart ached with admiration. Finally, when the last of the mob scattered in terror, Taza leaned against the side of the schoolhouse, chest heaving. He was uninjured, though dust and sweat streaked his face. For the first time, he allowed himself to exhale. Clara emerged cautiously. "Are you okay?" she asked. I'm fine," he said, voice low, though his eyes betrayed the tension still lingering in his muscles. She stepped closer. "They'll come again. They always do." Taza looked at her, really looked at the courage in her eyes, at the unwavering faith she had in him despite danger. Something inside him shifted. For years he had believed he must fight alone. That trust led to death. But here was someone who believed in him, who stood by him, even when others didn't. Single quotes T. He nodded slowly. "I protect you, always." Clara's eyes glistened. "I trust you, and I care for you." For a brief moment, the desert seemed to pause. The wind dropped. Even the sun held its golden breath. But peace was fleeting in the frontier. The sheriff's posse wasn't the only danger. Bandits, outlaws, and rustlers lurked beyond every ridge. And now Taza realized protecting Clara meant facing not just one mob, but countless trials, challenges, and threats that would test him like never before. Yet he did not flinch. Educational insight. Apache warriors often faced constant threats from settlers, outlaws, and rival tribes. Protecting their communities required strategy, speed, and deep knowledge of the land. Taza's defensive actions reflect traditional warrior practices. He avoids unnecessary killing, prioritizes safety, and uses intelligence over brute force. That night, after the sun had dipped behind the western hills, Taza and Clara sat outside the schoolhouse, the sky a canvas of purples and reds. Taza tended to his bow while Clara handed him a cup of water. Neither spoke of the mob. Words weren't needed. The silence held understanding. Clara finally broke it. "Why do you help me?" Taza looked at the horizon, jaw tight, then at her face. His eyes softened for the first time in years. "You give me hope. Something I thought lost. I fight heaven and hell for you." Clara's breath caught. It wasn't just a promise. It was a vow forged in fire, tested in danger. Born from a heart that had once sworn never to love. In that moment, the warrior and the teacher became allies in the truest sense, not just in battle, but in trust, courage, and the quiet awakening of something neither had expected: love. And though the frontier remained wild and dangerous, one truth was certain: Taza would leave. The wind howled through the canyons like a warning. Taza and Clara had fled the town under the cover of night, escaping the sheriff's false accusations. The rustlers who had framed him were still at large, and whispers of bounty hunters on horseback reached even the remote hills. Dustfall Valley, once a place of quiet hope, had become a crucible of danger. Clara stumbled over rocks, trying to keep pace with Taza, who moved like the desert wind itself, fast, silent, honoring. Every so often he would glance back, eyes scanning the darkness for any movement that didn't belong. Despite his calm exterior, the tension in his shoulders was palpable. This was not just another fight. This was a battle that could cost both their lives. Finally, they reached a narrow canyon cave hidden by jagged cliffs and scrub oak. Clara sank to the ground, exhaustion overtaking her. "Taza, maybe we should leave you. You can escape alone." I can't keep running like this," she whispered, fear lacing her words. Taza's eyes softened, but he shook his head. His hand found hers and squeezed it gently. "No, you are my spirit now. I fight heaven and hell for you," he said. Her heart trembled. She had known courage before, but never like this: raw, unwavering, and devoted. Taza had lived a life where attachment meant vulnerability, yet here he was, declaring that he would risk everything for her. Educational insight. In Apache culture, warriors were trained to protect their loved ones and community above all else. Courage was measured not just in battle, skill, but in loyalty and the willingness to face impossible odds for those one cared for. Taza's vow reflects this cultural principle. Personal safety is secondary to duty and honor. Hours passed as they hid in the shadows of the cave. The moon rose over the canyon, casting silver light on the jagged rocks. Every sound: a distant branch snapping, a coyote's cry, made Clara flinch. Taza remained vigilant, bow in hand, scanning the ridges with unwavering focus. By dawn, Taza made his decision. They could not remain in hiding forever. The rustlers and false witnesses would continue to endanger Dustfall, and the sheriff's greed would only worsen if left unchecked. They needed a plan, not escape, but justice. He turned to Clara. "We go back," he said. "We face them together." Clara's eyes widened. "Together?" she asked, fear and awe mingling in her voice. "Yes," Taza replied. If I flee alone, they will never stop hunting me. You make me stronger. We fight as one. Returning to Dustfall was more perilous than fleeing. They moved through hidden trails, using Taza's knowledge of the desert to avoid patrols and ambushes. He taught Clara to read the terrain, to notice subtle signs of movement in the sand, and how the wind could mask sound. Educational insight. Apache warriors were masters of tracking and terrain. They could anticipate enemy movements, read natural signs, and navigate vast landscapes without maps. Taza's guidance reflects this deep knowledge of the land, teaching survival skills to those he trusted. Finally, they arrived at the town just before sunrise. The streets were empty, the town still asleep. Taza and Clara moved quickly to the sheriff's office, where evidence of the rustlers' crimes lay: hidden stolen goods, cattle brands, and eyewitness statements. With Clara's insistence and Taza's presence, the truth finally emerged. The rustlers were arrested. The sheriff's false accusations collapsed under scrutiny. Taza, once hunted, was now recognized not only as innocent but as a hero who had protected the town from violence. Standing together in the early morning light, Taza looked at Clara, his stoic exterior softened by relief and something deeper love he had never thought possible. "We are safe," he said. Clara smiled, tears shining in her eyes. "Thanks to you. And your courage." He took her hand, holding it like a promise. "I will never let you go. Not now. Not ever." For the first time, Taza realized that fighting for someone meant more than survival. It meant trust, hope, and the courage to open one's heart. He had faced heaven and hell, and now he knew that no danger could shake the bond they had forged. Months had passed since Taza and Clara returned to Dustfall Valley, victorious yet wary. The town, once filled with suspicion and whispers, now greeted the Apache warrior with respect. Rumors of his bravery and integrity spread beyond the valley, reaching settlers and neighboring tribes alike. But the most profound change was not in the town, it was in Taza himself. The warrior who had once vowed never to love now walked with a new lightness in his step. His eyes, once cold and wary, softened with every glance at Clara. She had become his anchor, his reason to hope, and the bridge between his past and the future he had never imagined. The schoolhouse, once a humble wooden shack, had expanded under Clara's tireless dedication. More children arrived, including both settler and Apache children. They learned side by side, reading, writing, and sharing stories. Taza often appeared to watch, sitting quietly on the edge of the playground, a silent guardian. Sometimes he brought gifts: rare stones, feathers, or carefully wrapped bundles of dried herbs from the desert, as reminders that care could be shown without words. Educational insight. The Apache valued education, storytelling, and community bonding. By helping teach children, Taza was participating in cultural preservation while fostering cross-cultural understanding. Clara's school became a rare place where two worlds met respectfully. One warm evening, under a canopy of cottonwood trees, the town gathered for a modest celebration. Candles flickered, children laughed, and the scent of fresh bread and mesquite smoke filled the air. It was here, in front of settlers and Apache alike, that Taza knelt before Clara. "I was a man who never loved," he said, voice steady but full of emotion. "I believed my heart could only bring pain. But you stole my spirit. You showed me that love is strength and courage can come in many forms. I will fight heaven and hell for you, Clara, and I will spend every day proving it." Clara's eyes filled with tears. She stepped forward, taking his hand. "And I will stand by you, Taza, always. Your heart is not yours alone anymore, it's ours." The Apache elders nodded in approval, recognizing the bond as sacred. In their traditions, a union like this was not just personal, it symbolized trust, respect, and the promise of unity between communities. The wedding was simple yet profound. Clara wore a modest dress, her hair braided with strands of desert flowers. Taza stood tall, adorned with ceremonial beads and feathers that honored his ancestors. They exchanged vows, not only to each other but to the principles they now embodied: courage, respect, and unity. After the ceremony, children gathered around to hear stories. Taza, once silent, began to share tales of desert storms, trekking, and bravery. Clara translated some for the settler children, and together they laughed, learned, and imagined a world where understanding bridged divides. Educational insight. In Apache culture, storytelling is a way to preserve history, teach morals, and strengthen community bonds. By sharing his experiences, Taza ensured that the next generation learned both cultural traditions and the lessons of resilience, courage, and compassion. Months turned into years. Dustfall Valley flourished with a rare harmony. Taza and Clara worked together, teaching, protecting, and building a life that bridged two cultures. Children ran barefoot through the fields, learning both reading and the ways of the land. Settlers and Apaches shared meals, stories, and laughter. And in the center of it all stood Taza and Clara, proof that love could heal even the deepest wounds and change the destiny of those around them. The warrior who once refused to love had found a reason to live beyond survival. The teacher who arrived in the valley had given more than lessons in reading and writing. She had taught a man how to open his heart, and in doing so, transformed a community. And so, the Apache who never loved fiercely, openly, and without fear. The frontier had not changed. It remained wild, untamed, and full of challenges. But love had found a place among the desert winds, and Taza and Clara proved that courage, trust, and devotion could carve harmony even into the harshest land. Under the golden sunsets of Dustfall Valley, the warrior and the teacher walked side by side, a life forged from trials, trust, and love. And for the first time, Taza knew that opening one's heart was not weakness. It was the greatest strength of all.